Hey, it's Mark Pattison back again with another episode of Finding Your Summit. And we continue to get just great guests on. And I'm so blessed and fortunate to have this particular gentleman on the show, Steve Largent. And Steve is a guy that I grew up idolizing. He came to Seattle in 1976. I was just a freshman in high school. He was a rookie on the Seattle Seahawks football team, and he went on to have a 14-year NFL career, ultimately went into the Hall of Fame, and then served in Congress for 8 years, and just has had so many just amazing experiences. And we go through all this stuff. And the tie-in with overcoming his adversity. I mean, he had a number of things to go over, but the thing that we talk about is he had 4 kids, and one of those kids, one of his kids, unfortunately had a disease called spina bifida. And that essentially means that you have a hole in your back. And so through a lot of, like I said, adversity, they overcame. His kid, Kramer, is alive and well and healthy and happy and married, and he's 31 years old now. So they, as a family, got together, rallied, and they've just, continued on like any other family. So Steve is certainly a guy driven by his moral compass. I so enjoyed talking with him and what he stands for, what he's all about. And just, I feel like I'm a better person for it. So thank you, Steve, on that note. And remember, as always, go in and rate and review. It does matter. And if you want to know about public speaking or my climbs that are upcoming, which will be Denali, by the way, in May, you can go to markpattisonnfl.com. Okay? So on that note, let's go talk to Steve. Hey everybody, it's Mark Pattison back again with another great episode of Finding Your Summit. And I am so blessed, grateful, and fortunate to be beaming number one from Hermosa Beach, California, all the way across the country to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And today we are talking to a Hall of Famer, Steve Largent. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, Mark.
Man, I got to tell you, although I'm living in California right now, and that's due to a number of different circumstances, I am Seattle born and raised. And I think, there's a lot of memories for me, for people who don't, and I don't know who wouldn't know who you are, but, certainly you're an icon in the Seattle world. You played for the Seahawks for, 14 years?
14 years, yeah.
Incredible. And you set just incredible amount of records, and you were very prolific. And, at the end of the day, you're just a great guy to have represent, that team, that city. And I think there's so much appreciation for what you did for a franchise football team at the time, getting them kind of to where they are today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I tell you, my story didn't start out the way it ended up. And so I'll look forward to spending some time talking to you about that.
Yeah. So let's dig back in. To me, you've got such a fascinating story. Like a lot of these, different guys that have played in the league, you have more than gone the distance. The average lifespan of an NFL guy is 2.5 years or something. I made it to 5 barely, and I was never on your level, but I always had great respect for you. But did you grow up in the Oklahoma area?
I did. I was born in Tulsa and raised in Oklahoma City.
Okay. And, I know that from my days of being around you, are you 6 foot?
No, I've always been measured at 5'11" and a half.
Yeah. And when you say measured, is that like standing on your toes, or because you're the thing the thing that's so amazing about you is just that, your stature is not great, but you were able to do these amazing things.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I'm 5'11" and a half and weighed, when I played, about 190 pounds. And that today is still not a very big person on the football field.
Yeah. I mean, for you and I that were down there and next to these linemen who are just gigantic, 6'6", 300 plus. And then I'm a little bit taller, I'm 6'3", but, it's just such a violent sport. And the guys that you're going against, I was going against, the DBs, the safeties, they're big and they bring a lot of hardware, when you're out there and you get crunched, and you got to have that muscle around you to really protect yourself.
Yeah, there's no question about that. But, I can never remember a day stepping on the football field and worrying or no fear. I didn't even think about the possibilities of what could happen to me out there on that playing field with all these guys who were bigger, stronger, faster than I was. I always went out with an attitude that, I'm going to go out and I'm going to prove myself, and I'm going to catch everything they throw my way, and I'm going to know my assignments. And, I was thinking about what I had to do at that practice or at that game, whatever it was. And I didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about or worrying about how big guys were, how fast they were, or how slow I was. I was just thinking about what I I had to do and how I had to do it. And so that was my MO for playing football.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that, and I've told this to other people, is, and I've seen this, like literally seen this right before my eyes, and that is, we're having a scrimmage or it's a game, and somebody a receiver will do an over route or a slant or something, and they'll just get crunched, right? And it is over. And you literally have to have no fear to play at that level. D1 football too in college, I think it applies there, but more so in the NFL. And once that happens, once that goes out the door, you're done. You are done. No matter, It doesn't matter how much talent you have. I've just seen these guys go from like first round draft picks to nothing. Overnight with one hit.
I have too. Actually, I've seen some guys coming out of the University of Washington that happened to. And you're right. As soon as it happens, you're done. You can't go back. But guys start worrying about, who's going to hit them if they catch that ball before they catch the ball, and they can't ever catch it, regardless of anybody being there or not. And it really is, when that happens, you're done. And so I saw it happen. And fortunately for me, I was able to, play for 14 years in the National Football League and never have the thought cross my mind. That may say something about my stupidity, but, fortunately for me, it worked for me playing wide receiver.
Yeah. And so actually I was going to say this for later, but I'm going to throw it in right now. So for the people who know you, certainly Seahawks fans that many will hear and listen to this podcast, but you had a infamous hit that you sustained from Mike Harden of the Broncos. And it was really like, the perfectly timed slant route over the middle. And I think Dave Craig was the guy throwing the ball to you, and he didn't look off the safety. And so he just reacted immediately, and he literally clubbed you like Mike Tyson would take somebody out under the chin and knocked you out for a couple minutes.
Oh, yeah. I remember it clearly. People always ask me about the hardest hit I ever took, and that was it. And it was actually a 12-yard post route. And so I was running, not fast, but fast for me. And not looking at him at all. And Dave Craig was the quarterback, and he kind of floated the ball, which is not how you want somebody to throw a 12-yard post route to you. And Mike Harden had played cornerback and strong safety and was now playing free safety for the Broncos. And he was doing nothing but looking right at me. And he broke on Dave's look. And at that time, he had his arm taped up, not because he was injured, but just for the ability to use it the way he did on me.
Yeah, it was a club.
He threw his arm right into my face mask and broke my face mask and snapped my head back. And I was out before I hit the ground, and obviously didn't catch the ball, but I was out before I hit the ground and came to several to 5 or 10 minutes later and was out of the game at that point.
Yeah. And what we're just talking about is those types of hits can alter the course. And what's interesting to me too is that I believe at that time in your career, and I can't remember how far into your career that was, but you'd been in the league for a number of years, and you've been to Pro Bowls, and you were very well established, as was he, that a lot of times in that arena of superstars, there's mutual respect. And when he cracked you like that and you dropped, it almost seemed like he was gloating over that hit.
Oh, no question about it. I saw the film after he hit me, and he was, pointing his fingers and looking down on me. And he definitely was gloating about taking me out of the game, which he did. And so, there was never, he didn't even get called a penalty. I think later the league fined him $5,000, but that was, after the game was over. But he didn't get a penalty or anything on that particular play. And that always kind of bothered me.
Yeah, of course. And today with all the CTE, the concussion protocols, did you play the next week or did you sit that one out?
I played the next week, and that was in my 13th year. And we played Denver home and home. We were in the AFC West at the time. And I think that was an early game, like maybe the third or fourth or fifth game we played, when he did that.
It's incredible. That happened to me. I was drafted by the Raiders, and a similar type of situation, and completely knocked me out. And again, back in the day of the no protocol concussion deal, I was on the field the next week, and it wasn't like, hey, I went to the hospital, I got a scan, hey, get him back out there. It was just all about performance, not really about the safety of the game. And so it's great that they've kind of taken a right-hand turn. And really thinking more about the safety of the player. So the beautiful thing, I think you call it sweet revenge or whatever, was, and again, obviously this must have been, was it the same season or was it the next season, your 14th year?
Yeah, we played them home and home. So that was the first game we played in Denver, and the second game we played in Seattle.
Yeah, and he had intercepted a ball, and somehow or another, you just happened to be on the field in the right place at the right time where you came up and just, I don't even know what the word is, but you just literally knocked him off his feet, and the ball fell into the air, onto the turf, and you recovered that ball. And it was just such a violent hit. And the surprising thing, going back to your stature, is I think it just surprised so many people because he was a well put together guy, and you just come out of nowhere and just blast him.
I tell you, that is my favorite play in my NFL career. Not a catch, but a tackle on Mike Harden. And it's because of all the stuff that had gone on the previous game when we played the Broncos in Denver. And people always ask me about that play, and they'll say, did you know that was Mike Harden before you hit him? And my response is, and it's the truth, I absolutely knew it was Mike Harden, and I tried to hit him as hard as I've ever tried to hit anybody in my life, and I did.
Well, I know you a little bit from the University of Washington, and I knew you for a short spell at the Seahawks, but you're such a kind guy, and you're not a person that talks a lot of smack, but I think on that particular hit, you just were amped up, and, you threw it out there.
I did. It had to do with, I don't forget. And so, yeah, it was really a thrill for me. And not only that, we had lost the game in Denver. We won this game. And that just I think it was about the end of the first quarter, second quarter, I think, when this happened. And it kind of lit our whole team up. And we ended up winning the game against the Broncos in the Kingdome, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I remember watching the game with my grandfather, and it lit everybody up. It wasn't just the players on the field, but, all the fans. And, the Seattle fans, 12th man, all that stuff, they're so amazing. And so to get people riled up in that old Kingdome, I mean, it's loud enough, as you know, in the new Seahawks Stadium, Quest Field. But that old Kingdome, before they imploded it, was just a very loud, powerful place to play a football game.
It was. It sure was. And everybody was on their feet after that particular play. And I didn't see that because I was too busy high-fiving my teammates.
Yeah, you just made me think about my legendary college coach who, of course, you knew, Don James, and he used to throw out a big hit award every week. And so I, kind of like you, I took it as a source of pride to kind of go headhunting, on offense, because normally that was reserved for defensive players. And, when somebody would, whether it be a block or, sweep, crackback, or somebody would intercept the ball, I was always looking to go after. And it just really motivated me. And, again, I'm not that aggressive defensive minded, but it did motivate me more than normal. So anyways, I want to go back though in this whole thing about your childhood, and you talked about no fear, right? Which I totally identify with in terms of trying to make it all the way through the different levels. And was there something, whether it was your parents, the confidence, something that happened in high school, a mentor, a coach that kind of continued to feed that of kind of like the little engine that could? You played at the D1 level, of course, at Tulsa. And then, of course, your prolific career in the NFL. Was there somebody along the way that kind of really put you over the top?
I think I would say there were several people in my life that played a real instrumental role in encouraging me, not just to play football, but in life. I would say first and foremost would be my mother. When I was going into my sophomore year in high school, I had gone up to get my equipment and sign up to play for the team that August. And I came back really intimidated by the number of players and the size of the players. I probably weighed 165 pounds at the time and was probably 5'10". And there was a lot of guys that were sophomores, but more than that, juniors and seniors. And I was going to the largest high school in the state of Oklahoma, which, that doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but Oklahoma plays pretty good football, and we had a very good team and a good coach, and we had a lot of players trying to play. And that particular high school, they fielded a varsity team, obviously. They had a junior varsity team and two sophomore teams. Actually, two junior varsity teams and then one sophomore team. So we had, 150, 160 kids out for the team every single year. So that was all very intimidating. I went back home and told my mom, I don't think I'm going to play football after all. And she goes, Steve, she said, I know this coach the head coach's name was Jerry Potter, and he's a great coach, has a great reputation. And she said, I just think you need to go try it. So she was the one that really encouraged me at kind of one of my down points in my young career as a football player anyway. And so I followed her advice. I went and tried out for the team and ended up doing pretty good. And I wasn't a starter on offense for our varsity team, but I was the guy that ran the play in. Every other play, I would run it into the quarterback, and then he would take the play, call it, and I'd go out for the next play, and the next guy would come in. So I didn't get a lot of playing experience, but there weren't a lot of sophomores on that varsity team. There was only 4 or 5 guys that lettered as sophomores, and I was one of them. And so that really was an encouragement to me. And the head coach was just a great guy and a great mentor of mine. And I always talk about Jerry Potter whenever I'm asked. And unfortunately, he passed away just a few years ago, but really a great man and a great coach. And I really learned a lot about football and how you conduct yourself and how you prepare yourself, play well. And that really got me going as far as a football player was concerned. But I had several mentors like my mom and then Jerry Potter, as I mentioned. And when I went off to college, I ended up being matched up with a guy named Jerry Rome. And Jerry had finished his career in NFL. He was also a student athlete at the University of Tulsa, had come back to Tulsa at the end of my freshman year to be our offensive quarterback and receiver coach and offensive coordinator. And he really taught me a lot about the game, and had a real good idea about what kind of passing game he wanted to implement, and did that. And we were really a very good offensive team back in those days. And, our record went from, we were 8-3 one year and 7-4 another year. And I think maybe 6-5 in another year, but we really had good offensive teams. And that was due largely to Jerry Rome and just the way he thought and the way he conducted himself and the way he developed our offense, and the game plan was really professional. And speaking of professional football, Jerry ended up going to coach professional football at the end of my senior year. And he was named to be the quarterback and receiver coach for the Seahawks. And I was drafted by the Houston Oilers. So Jerry went northwest and I went south, but he was a real big mentor of mine. And then I had a couple other coaches, particularly Steve Moore in Seattle, that also were great mentors and great people and still friends today.
That's great. So, as I close my eyes and think about Oklahoma football back in the 70s, I'm thinking nothing short of a veer offense with not a lot of passing. Was that the case in high school?
Not in high school. We ran a professional pro offense in high school where a quarterback was expected to be able to throw the ball, and we ran it. But we threw the ball maybe 20, 25 times a game, which is not a lot compared to professional football today or even high school football today.
That's a lot.
But that was a lot for high school at that time. But, Jerry Potter, he had brought up a quarterback that the same grade as I was, and his name was Tony Brantley, who really had a big league arm. And he actually signed to go to school at Notre Dame. And, I went to the University of Tulsa, but he was a good quarterback, could throw the ball very well. And so we implemented the tools that we had, and I had a pretty prolific career in high school.
So, I don't mean this in any slight any way, but compared to Oklahoma, did you feel like when you got a scholarship to Tulsa that you should have or wanted to go to a bigger name school than that? Or that's just kind of what happened? You're totally cool with it. It was all good.
Two things. One is that the two major colleges in Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, both went to the Wishbone my freshman year. I think OU was actually in the Wishbone my senior year in high school. So I never even was recruited, didn't even get a look from the University of Oklahoma. Plus they recruited Tinker Owens, a good receiver for them for, throwing the football 5 times a game. But they had a good receiver already. And then they ended up signing Billy Brooks to be another receiver that they had during that time. So they didn't need me. Oklahoma State, they told me they were going to run professional style offense, but they did end up going to the Wishbone the very next year. And so I would tell you that the two major colleges that I was interested in going to school at, neither one threw the ball that much. And so I was really fortunate that I had the opportunity to go to the University of Tulsa. I had other recruiting trips to TCU and a few other places, but really I was looking at staying in state. But the University of Tulsa was the only school that I was aware of or that was recruiting me that ran a professional style offense. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. Plus, my grandfather was always a fan of the University of Tulsa. He had grown up in Tulsa Tulsa, and I was a real fan of their program. And so he was really a guy that was whispering in my ear encouragingly to think about the University of Tulsa. And so that, and the fact that it's a private school, so they have an excellent educational program. And my thought was, I'm going to go to TU and play football, and I'm going to get my education and get my degree and go to work. And I thought I could get a degree that, made a difference by going to the University of Tulsa. And so that's what I did.
Yeah. Well, I can relate to that story as well. I went to the big city school, Roosevelt, landed in the middle of Seattle. And then I went, another 1 mile up the street to the University of Washington.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a big booster there. My mom was a cheerleader. And so, there's a whole family legacy, and it's kind of hard to get off that dime. I was recruited kind of up and down the West Coast, but certainly Don James kind of had the whole wave going at that time. And Warren Moon had been there a couple years ago, taking the Huskies to a Rose Bowl. And, things are always hindsight, right? You have no idea that you'd have had this amazing career in the NFL. And certainly I had no idea that Don James would become a Hall of Fame coach, and he produced so many players to the NFL and really happened to be in the right place at the right time when all that happened. So I feel very blessed and fortunate that that decision was made. So now you're drafted by the Oilers, right? Houston Oilers, which I believe today are the Tennessee Titans, correct?
That's correct. Yep. Bum Phillips was in his second year at the Houston Oilers.
What was he like?
He was really a good guy. I liked Bum a lot. Wade, his son, was coaching for the Oilers too, but he was just a young guy he's probably not 5 years older than I am. But Bum was really a decent guy. And so it kind of came as a real heartbreak when he called me into his office and said I wasn't going to be able to play for him after 4 weeks of training camp, or actually 6 weeks of training camp, 4 preseason games. Yep. But I always respected him, and I really liked him. He was a player's coach, but really was a hard-nosed, good coach to play for, I thought.
And were you cut and then picked up, or were you traded to the Seahawks?
No, I was cut, and then I was on recallable waivers. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if they do that anymore, but it was a deal where a team could put you on waivers and then recall you if anybody was interested to work out a trade. And so that's what happened. And Seattle was one of I know there were 3 teams for sure. San Francisco, Chicago, and Seattle were interested in me. And Seattle offered an 8th round draft choice if I would come up there. And so that's what happened.
And was this around 1976?
Yep, 1976 was the year, and it was the year I graduated from TU, and the draft was held in May, and then I went to training camp in August with the Oilers for 6 weeks, and then got cut and came up to Seattle and played in the 5th preseason game. It was a Friday or Saturday night up here in Seattle. We played it in Seattle. I'm trying to remember who we played. I know our 6th game was against Oakland because we weren't playing in the AFC West at that time. The first 2 years, we played all the teams in the AFC and all the teams in the NFC in consecutive years. And then in the 3rd year, we were put into the AFC West. So we played the Raiders the last preseason game that I played for the Seahawks. And, the beauty of that is that, and I would tell you, the reason I was able to play as much and as well as I did in those first 2 preseason games was because Jerry Rome had taken our pass offense from the University of Tulsa and put it into the Seahawks game plan. And so if he said line up and split right 76, I knew exactly where to line up and exactly what route to run and what everybody else was supposed to be doing around me and when the timing was supposed to happen, the quarterback's supposed to throw the ball. I'd run those plays for 3 years in college and knew exactly where to go. And that was a big boost to my ability to make the team that year.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't truly understand because, you open the paper and you go to the sports section and you go to like E4 of that section and it's transactions and they go, oh, look, so-and-so got traded. And what they don't understand is somebody, it happened to me a few times, but, you pack up, you put everything into getting an apartment, you get the electricity going, you have your car there, and then presto, you are cut, and then now we're going to go and you end up in a new city, and then trying to transition that into a learning curve of having to really understand a whole new language, which, you're so fortunate that Jerry Rome was the guy that was there that implemented that passing structure. So it sounded like it was a pretty easy transition for you.
Well, it really is. I'm just thinking about what you were saying. It really is true that when you're going from, say, the University of Washington and you get drafted by the Oakland Raiders and you go down there. And when I was drafted in 76, that was a long time before you came out, Mark, but there was no expectation that the player would move to the city prior to training camp and start learning the system and meeting the other players. There was no expectation expectation whatsoever that you would do that. They expected you to, finish your college program, be in shape when you come to camp, and go for it. But in reality, what happens in that system when you just are jumping into training camp and learning a whole new system, a dialogue, a language, it's really like going to a foreign country, going to China, and you only speak English and everybody else only speaks Chinese, and you're trying to learn how to assimilate in that culture. Well, as a football player, I was trying to assimilate into this Houston Oilers offense and learning a whole different language with different reads and different expectations and different depths of routes and all that kind of stuff. And it was too much for me. And I felt like I was a pretty smart guy, but it just came on me so rapidly. I didn't adjust very well at all. In fact, I didn't adjust at all. And so I didn't have a good training camp. You never read any articles about me blaming Bum Phillips for getting cut, because I knew exactly why he cut me, because I didn't assimilate to their system very well. But in Seattle, it was a totally different story. I walk in and boom, the first day I'm running the first route. I know exactly the depth, exactly when to break, exactly when to look for the ball, when it's coming, how high it's going to be or whatever. I knew it. And I was really ahead of most of the players that were on the Seahawks team and had been in training camp for 6 weeks, because I knew the system. I'd played in it for 3 years and I knew where I was supposed to line up and everything else. So it was a real advantage to me.
So was it Jack Patera, the head coach, or was it
Jack Patera? Yep. Jack was the first head coach of the Seahawks.
He was, and I can always remember the legendary training camps you guys had in Cheney, Washington. For those who don't know, that's over by Spokane, kind of the eastern part of the state, and there was no water allowed. Is that true?
Yeah, there was no water on the field at all until John Nordstrom found out about it. Now, when John found out about it, John was a real avid runner, and he knew the importance of having fluids in your system, and he knew better than Jack did. And so after about 3 or 4 or 5 years, repetitively seeing what was taking place with the Seahawks, he demanded that Jack put water on the field for the players, and the players were very grateful for that.
It's just insane to think that there's no water. For those who don't know, it's very dry out there. And in the hundreds.
And hot. Yeah, that's right.
Hot. Yeah. Yeah, it's just amazing. But that changed. And the other guy that you hooked up with, and I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, the quarterback at the time was a guy named Jim Zorn. And Jim was this crafty left-hander who just played a lot like Fran Tarkenton.
Yeah.
Right. And you guys just had this chemistry of improvising, of making things happen. And even though the teams were struggling back in the early days, I think the offense, a little bit like your Tulsa thing, it sounds like, is very electric, and you always had very entertaining, plays and games, and it always seemed like you were in it.
Yeah, well, that's right. We had to scramble a lot. Jim had to scramble literally a lot. But Jim was a guy who had a kind of a hard luck story too. He went to Cal Poly Pomona, which was kind of his local college. He went to junior college, then went there, Cal Poly Pomona, and I think he was a 1 or 2 year starter, no more than that. And it had some pretty good numbers, but ended up being a free agent for the Dallas Cowboys. Ended up being cut after the last cut. The last cut, he survived, and then they picked up a running back from Pittsburgh and signed him and let Jim go. And so that's Jim's rookie year. And so Jim ends up floating around a little bit, and he actually was signed by the Los Angeles Rams. And they hid him on their roster because there was no excess players back then. But what teams would do was hide players on their roster and pay them some amount of money, $20,000 or something like that, just to practice with the team and to learn the system and kind of be, on board in case they had a quarterback that got hurt. And so that's what Jim did. He kind of hid out in LA, practiced with the Rams, but didn't ever play. And then the next year was 76. And that's when the Seahawks came on board, and he left the Rams and went to Seattle and got his start. So Jim was not like a real heralded quarterback, but he was exactly what the Seahawks needed. Somebody that could throw the ball, was a pretty smart guy, and could run. Because that's the one thing that Jim did exceptionally well, better than any other quarterbacks that we had, was be mobile. And that's how he got the reputation of being like Fran Tarkenton, because Fran Tarkenton was a very mobile guy too. And with our offensive line and the pass blocking that they were trying to do, it was a good thing Jim could run, because he had to run for his life a lot.
What makes your relationship with Jim, who I know a little bit, he's a great guy. What is that chemistry between you two? I mean, I'm not just talking about it on the field. I mean, what was that connection piece that you guys had off the field as well?
Well, I would say right off that Jim is the best friend I have and has been since that first year in 1976. We just kind of grew up together in the NFL. I jumped on the team 2 games left in the preseason. Jim was there he was not the established starter, but he pretty much was the established guy by the time I got there in the 5th week of the preseason. But, we just connected. Jim was a guy that liked to work hard, and I did too. He liked to do extra in practice, and I was willing to stay out there and run routes and catch passes from him as long as he wanted to. We were always the first 2 guys that were in the practice facility in the off season, working out and running routes and getting familiar with one another and different aspects of the football execution of football. We were totally on the same page, so that when we went out on the field, it was like my mind and Jim's mind were one, and there was never a doubt in either of our minds what we were doing or what we were trying to get accomplished. And I think it was just the amount of time that we spent together and the friendship that was formed that lasts to this day.
Yeah, well, it's just, you look back and when you start talking about the body of work, the whole notebook is full. First and foremost is that you set all kinds of different records, the most yards, the most receiving yards, or most catches. And I think you held on to that for a very long time until Jerry Rice came along, right?
Yep, that's right.
And with that, you form very tight friendships. And 14 years doing anything is a long time. And, the guys that, for me, it's, you hear this all the time, but it's the locker room, the guys that you meet along the way, the friendships that you have, and just, in my case, certainly, even though I didn't have near the career you did, I just feel so blessed. I had my 15 seconds of fame of getting in and kind of hanging out for a while before I got tossed out. And, for everybody, it doesn't matter if you're somebody like me or a Hall of Famer like you, it all comes to an end at some point in time in your life.
Yep, sure does.
So what was going to the Hall of Fame like?
It was great. Let me go back to what you just said.
Sure.
About the length of career. Now, when I came into the league, remember, I came into the league being cut by the first team that drafted me, and then they've been picked up by Seattle later on. But my goal when I entered the National Football League, I think Sherman Smith, one of the players that played for the Seahawks and later coached in the NFL for a long time, Sherman and I always had a goal to play 4 years in the National Football League. That was our goal because we knew what the rotation was like and how many players were trying to compete with you and make the team. And every year you felt like you had to make the team again. And so Sherman and I knew that that was the case. And we just said, we set a goal to play 4 years. So it was like our freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year. That's what we call it as we went through the years with the Seahawks. But that was our goal, to get to 4 years. And if we did that, we thought we made it. But, that's the name of the game in the NFL. It is very transitional. There's a lot of guys that want to take your position. Every training camp, there's a host of guys that are going to compete with you to win that spot. And so you can never let down. You can never back up. You can never, take a knee because somebody's always wants your spot. They don't want the spot behind you. They want your spot. And so that's the nature of the game. That's really what makes the game so great because it is so very, very competitive.
No, I appreciate that. And I've been on both sides of that coin. And,
yes, you have.
And I did make it 4 years as going into my fifth with the Hawks, and it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. But, I think we all have what our destiny is, and that was mine. And I moved on from there and did a lot of things. And, some are destined for greatness, and greatness can be defined in many different ways and many different colors. And for you, you did this, and they recognized you for your great football accomplishments by inducting you into the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah, you're leaping ahead here in my career, but that was a spectacular moment in my life. It was, just to think that here's this kid that got cut his 5th week in training camp, 6th week in training camp, and now he ends up having a 14-year career in the National Football League, all with the same team, and now he's going into the Hall of Fame. It just, as I said many times, I had to pinch myself to believe it was really happening.
Again, I can't imagine. I know a number of the guys that I played with, I just, had 2 minutes of being in their presence, guys like you who made it. And it just, it's just the commonality is all the same in terms of the work ethic and the dedication to the game and the attention to detail and all those things. And, to actually go that far and, there's only X amount of guys who are in that Canton Hall of Fame. And for you to be a part of that is amazing. And so congratulations, and just a remarkable accomplishment. I wanted to go back and sorry for darting around, but because there's so much stuff that we can talk about, but I just remembered about, so kind of towards the end of your career, you did what most people don't do, which is kind of go out on your own term for the most part. And so years later, the Seahawks recognized that by retiring your number 80 jersey. And then years after that, Jerry Rice, the great wide receiver who broke your records, some of them, he'd always been number 80. He comes to the Seattle Seahawks, and now there's some negotiation or something that he wants to wear number 80. How did that go down? I mean, that's just kind of weird to me.
Yeah, well, it was weird to me too. And it was weird to Jerry Rice too, because what happened was the general manager at the time, and I don't even know his name, but he was hired by Ken Behring. He was actually a professional basketball guy and not a professional football guy, but he messed it all up. So he negotiated and he got Jerry Rice to come up. This was when Jerry's, kind of in his last days. I think it was before he went to Oakland. Maybe it was after he went to Oakland. Yeah. I can't remember. But anyway, it was towards the end of his career, and they signed him to play in Seattle. And so the general manager called me up after he signed Jerry Rice, and he said, Steve, he said, I know the Seahawks have retired your jersey, but we just signed Jerry Rice, and he said that he really wants to wear number 80, but we're not going to let him unless you say it's okay. And so at that point I go, well, gosh, I obviously knew who Jerry Rice was. I played against Jerry Rice. And, having my jersey retired and brought out of retirement for Jerry Rice to wear it, that's a big honor. So, yeah, that's fine. But what I found out after the fact was that this same GM then went to Jerry Rice and said, Jerry, he said, I've got good news. He said, I've talked to Steve Largent and he wants you to wear his jersey. Jerry didn't ask to wear it. He didn't expect to wear number 80 when he came to Seattle. But the general manager kind of did a flim-flam deal on me and Jerry and told each of us that the other person wants Jerry to wear the jersey, and that, in fact, was not the case.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. Look, the drill, and I know you're like this, but you got to be straight up. And that's just, especially the respect to have between two Hall of Famers. And not to, call it like it is. And actually, you two should have just talked. And I'm sure it wouldn't have been a big deal and you guys would have worked it out. But it's just, it's kind of awkward for him, awkward for you. And
right.
This guy was just telling you something that, just wasn't the case.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. So again, we could spend 2 hours on this podcast talking about these amazing feats that you had on the football field. But now as you transitioned after your 14th year, you're married, you're having kids, you enter into politics. Why did you do that, of all things?
That's a good question. You need to ask my wife that question because she was the one that really encouraged me to do that. I didn't want to do anything in politics. I had never taken an interest in politics. The closest that I ever got was when we signed Jeff Kemp to be on our team. And Jeff, of course, is the oldest son of Jack Kemp. And a great guy. And I would ask him questions all the time about what's going on in politics. And he would tell me or talk about stories that his dad had from serving in Congress. And that was really the first time I had ever even thought about politics, but it wasn't to eventually go into politics. It was just simply learning some things. But when we moved back to Tulsa after my 14th year in the league in Seattle, and there happened to be an open seat after I'd been here for 2 years, and there was an open seat election I'd been here 5 years. So there was an open seat election for the 1st Congressional District in Oklahoma. And my wife says, I really think you need to do this. And then Senator Don Nichols called me. He was the sitting senator at that time. He said, Steve, I really want to encourage you to do this too. And so at the end of the day, the long and short of it is that I ended up telling my wife that I would run. I would put some of my own money behind me. And if I won, then that's great. It's meant to be. And if I lose, then I don't want to ever hear anything else about this. And so she agreed to that. And I ran and I ended up winning.
Wow. So you ran in 1994?
94. That's right.
And how long did that run go for?
I was in for 8 years. I left with about 3 months left to go in my fourth term because at that point I decided to run for governor and not be in Congress any longer.
So this is a stupid question, but were you living in Washington, D.C. and traveling back to Oklahoma, or were you basing everything out of Tulsa?
I was in Tulsa. My family was here, and then I would fly every week back to D.C., conduct the business of Congress, and then come back to Tulsa and be with my family or do the different things that you have to do as a representative for your district. But yeah, no, I kept my family right here in Tulsa. We never wanted to move to Washington, D.C. I never had any idea that we would ever be in D.C. when I made the decision to run. But I did run and I did win. And I would tell you that it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in my life. Football certainly was more fun and I loved it. But I made a lot of great friends in Congress and learned a lot about this country and the way it runs and sometimes doesn't run well.
So obviously you're in the White House, you're in the Capitol, you're in that whole environment, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, I've been there a number of times and just walking around, there's so much history and just the greatness of what this country was founded on. It's just to me, it's very energizing when I land there, go up to Georgetown and see these old historic buildings. It's fantastic. It's really amazing. And for you to actually go and pull that off and, feel like you're actually doing the right thing, because that's the type of guy you are. I also believe that you are a faith-based guy with the right kind of moral compass. And those are the types of people that we need in office today to really guide this country to where we're going.
Well, Mark, I said the same thing before I went to Congress. I said it when I was in Congress, and I say it now that I'm out of Congress. I agree with you 100%. And I think, for a family that's listening to your podcast, if they've never been to Washington, D.C., go, because it is a fabulous experience. It takes your breath away, really, when you see the buildings and you see the sites and you see all the things that have been accomplished by all the great presidents and people in Congress. It really is humbling, I think, to witness that.
Well, in order for you to go and pull that off and fly back and forth between Washington, D.C. and Oklahoma, you must have a strong family. Number one, I know you have 4 kids and certainly a very supporting wife.
Well, my wife has been my best friend since we were in high school, and nobody knows me better than my wife does, for sure. And she's in corralling my grandkids as I speak. But you can't write a life story about Steve Largent without talking a lot about my wife, Terry.
So the name of this podcast is called Finding Your Summit, and everything we've talked about so far is just, really a rock star life, and you achieving at the very highest level of 2 different industries, right? One is in professional sports and the other one is within politics and government. And I know that one of the setbacks that you experienced was one of your sons, you have 4 kids, and one of your sons, Kramer, has spina bifida.
Right.
And tell me what that was like. And I'm coming from a little bit of place of ignorance. You're born with this, or is this something that you develop, or how did that all play?
Well, let me tell you, first of all, that my wife and I had 3 children before Kramer. And we had determined that that was all the children we were going to have. And in fact, I had previous off season had gone to take extreme measures to assure that we only had 3 kids. And Kramer was conceived probably 2 weeks after I had been to the doctor to make that permanent measure successful. And so it was, talk about a total surprise and a total gift from the Lord. That's what he was. And so I was very excited when I found out that my wife was pregnant for the 4th time. And my wife was absolutely furious. She did not want to be pregnant again. She had a hard pregnancy, her 3rd one, and she did not want to do it again. And also Kramer was conceived probably about 4 months after his older brother was born. So they were like boom, boom. We had Kelly in 84 and Kramer was born in 85. They were about 14 or 15 months apart. So to say it was unplanned, it goes without saying. And my wife really had a difficult time adjusting to the idea that she was pregnant again. But she was, and I was thrilled, and she was upset, and she kind of came around. And then Kramer, when he was born in November, which is right in the middle of the football season. And the first thing the doctor says to me when he pulls Kramer out, this was the same doctor, same hospital, same setup that we'd gone through 3 times before. So I felt a bit like a veteran at this. He turned to me and says, Steve, we got a problem here. Kramer's got a hole in his back. This is called spina bifida. And he said, you're going to face kind of a lifetime of decisions you have to make about and for Kramer. And when he said that to me, it just crushed me. I fell back. I sat down in the chair and I just started sobbing and crying uncontrollably. And it really took me a long time before I was able to kind of get my hands around this and understand that I couldn't be the crybaby here. I had to be the adult and grown up and lead my family and deal with this in a way that I felt like God wanted me to, because there's no surprises to God. And this was not a surprise to him either. And so, I had to put my big boy pants on, as we used to say. And I did that. And, it turns out Kramer's now 32 years old and he's married and he's doing remarkably well. He still has to wear braces on his feet. He catheterizes. He has issues with his eyes and with his shunt that he has to shunt off excess pressure from his brain. He still has that in him. So he's got a myriad of issues, but he's still the brightest, happiest kid you'd ever want to beat, and just an all-around great guy. And I'm so proud of him and so happy that he's my son.
Well, what a gift, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is not anything but that. And you love him just the same as your other kids. And there was just some things that you had to overcome. But most importantly, probably through the strength of your wife and through the strength of your faith and who you are, it helped you guys to get through probably those early days and figure it out. And, over time, he became independent. And as you said, he's married and leading a very successful, happy life. And what more do we all want for our own kids, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I couldn't be more proud of him.
Yeah, I have a daughter named Amelia. She's this beautiful, amazing person that is now a freshman at the University of Arizona and just loving life. But, she's since about 6 years old. Actually, we were in Europe and I discovered that something just wasn't quite right in what she was having as these small seizures, which she has today, which she has to deal with. And, she's just overcome so much. I'm so proud of her for she can play sports and she can do this and that, and they haven't gone away. She can't drive. She can't ride a bike. She can't do a lot of things, but that has not stopped her from being all that she can be, and just a bright light in my life, and so blessed to, have her and all the different joy and happiness that she brings to the table. So I can at some level relate to what you're talking about, and just, it is a blessing.
Yeah, there's no question about that, Mark.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, listen, Steve, I can say this from the bottom of my heart. I am so grateful and happy and enthusiastic and every other word that you agreed to come on this pod. You were such a sports icon. You came over to the Seahawks in 1976. I was just starting high school. I don't want to date you too much, in terms of our age gap. But at the same time, you served as a role model for me as I was going through high school. And I kind of like you, from sophomore, junior year, senior year, things really started to roll for me. And I was fortunate enough to earn a scholarship to the University of Washington. And then, when I got there, I was there for 5 years, and we were going to all kinds of crazy bowl games, the Rose Bowl a couple times, the Orange Bowl, and a couple of Aloha Bowls, but we were always in contention for the conference championship and coming down to Pasadena. And during that entire time, even when my 5th year, we were in Miami, and I actually went and saw the playoff game against the Dolphins that you guys had. And I can't remember who won that game, but it was just, again, I'm a senior in college, a 5th year guy, and I'm there to play in the Orange Bowl, and I'm out there watching you compete. I'd been doing that for a number of years, and, you're just a guy that I always looked up to, wanted to be like, and, things happened to play my way, and I got drafted. And again, I didn't have the kind of career you had, but at the same time, I feel so blessed just to be, a part of the club at some level for the years that I was there. So deep appreciation to you.
Oh, well, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that. I remember you being with the Seahawks. My last year there was your first year in Seattle. And, what a good receiver you were. And, it doesn't last forever. Nothing does. But it was a heck of a lot of fun, wasn't it?
It was. So, all right, buddy. Listen, on this note, we're going to post this out in a couple of weeks. I will let you know when that's going to happen. One last thing. Aren't you and Jim Zorn collaborating on a book?
We are. How did you know that? I didn't know you knew that, but yeah, we are. I don't know if we're ever going to pull it off, but we are collaborating right now, as a matter of fact.
That's great. So, if that does in the next month get published, which I doubt.
We're looking at the next year. So you got to hang around a little bit longer.
Well, I will push that out in the show notes when that's, ready to happen. But anyways, it's great to hear about you and Jim collaborating and, old best friends and in your life, where you've been. And again, so grateful that you came on this pod.
All right. Thank you, buddy.
All right. Thank you. Hey, and thank you so much for listening to the Find Your Summit podcast. We are so glad to have you along for this journey. And if you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend, share it on iTunes, spread it to the planet. We're looking to broadcast this to every person that is out there because, as you know, everybody has their own summit that they're going after. If you're looking to follow my journey, you can find that through my social links on markpattisonnfl.com. That's Mark, M-A-R-K, Pattison, P-A-T-T-I-S-O-N, NFL.com. So, until the next podcast, just remember, clear eyes, full hearts, and remember, it takes a little more to make a champion, so make it happen. Thank you. Bye.